Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. Today's video we're going to be talking about unpopular witchcraft opinions. But they're not going to be my opinions, no. They're going to be your unpopular witchcraft opinions. A few months ago, I did a video where I spoke about my unpopular witchcraft opinions, or at least what I believed were unpopular witchcraft opinions, and at the end of that video, I asked all of you what your unpopular witchcraft opinions were, with the intention of making this video. And it's taken me several months, but I finally got around to doing it, and boy oh boy, you lot did not disappoint. I had so many unpopular witchcraft opinions on the comment section of that video that there are just way too many to fit into this video. So I've chosen a selection of unpopular witchcraft opinions from all of you so that we can talk about them and have an open conversation about them within this video. Now, I haven't been able to select them all because there were just so many, and a lot of them were very repetitive and they repeated themselves a lot. So I've selected a whole bunch from that initial video to include in this video. And if by the end of this video you still haven't heard your unpopular witchcraft opinion, feel free to put it down in the comment section of this video, and I might do another one in a few months with some more unpopular witchcraft opinions. And just before we get started, I do want to remind everyone that these comments and these unpopular opinions come from comments left on my channel by other people. I'm not necessarily going to agree with all of them, and it's likely that you aren't going to either. Just make sure that any communication that's happening in the comment section is done respectfully. Everyone has an opinion, but not all opinions are going to align with every other opinion. And so I don't want the comment section to become a whole fighting match between people. Instead, make sure that you're respectful so that we can have an open conversation and really discuss points rather than, just at each other, because that's really not going to get us anywhere. With that being said, let's get started on these opinions. Now, I have not given myself time to think about any of these unpopular opinions. I went through the entire comment section on that last video and I screenshotted anything with the phrase unpopular opinion in it, and we're just going to be working through those. So I have not had time to mull over and really think about these opinions. These are just going to be my first gut reaction to all of these. So let's start with this one. This one says, you don't need to work with deities or even believe in them to practice witchcraft. That's a really interesting one, actually, and I can understand why it might be considered an unpopular opinion, especially with social media. A lot of people do talk about deity work, about finding deities, connecting with deities. A lot of questions are asked about deity work, so I can understand why this might be perceived as an unpopular opinion. And I will admit, I agree with it. I don't think that you need to work with deities to practice witchcraft, and I don't think that you even need to believe in deities to practice witchcraft. And this really draws on the idea that witchcraft is secular. Witchcraft is non-religious. And because of that, you can attach other religions onto it. So you can be a Wiccan witch. You can follow one of the pagan traditions and be a witch. You can also be a Christian witch or an atheist witch, or follow singular deities and be a witch. And I think because of that, you don't actually need to believe in or attach a deity for it to be functional. There's lots of other options out there other than deity work. Now, deity work can be really powerful, and for some people, it can work really, really well, but it definitely isn't the be-all, end-all of witchcraft, not at all. There's so many other things that you can work with other than deities. You can work with fairies, you can work with land wights, you can work with elementals, you can work with element energies, but also you can just work with yourself. You don't need to attach anything else onto that practice if you don't want to. And I think maybe some of the idea that you require deities comes from social media, because you do see a lot of people talking about how to find deities and what signs to look out for if you're wanting to connect with deities, and they often get lumped into these beginner witchcraft practices such as meditation, such as energy work. You'll often find that deity work gets lumped into these beginner witchcraft practices. and they don't necessarily need to be connected. Now, of course, not all witchcraft is the same thing. Witchcraft is a form of magical practice. Some traditions will include deities as a part of that tradition, and there are other traditions outside of witchcraft that are the magical traditions that do follow a very particular deity or a particular religious belief. So it's really important to note here that within witchcraft, you don't have to follow or believe in deities to have a successful magical practice. But there are other magical traditions out there beyond witchcraft that do require specific religious or spiritual beliefs in order to practice it appropriately. And so it's just really important to take a note of that. But yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I'm curious as to what you all are going to think about it, because I have met a lot of people who say that deity work is a requirement. I have to say that I have never found it to be that way. I do have deities that I work with, but I only found them in 2016, one of those two. So really, it's a very new part of my practice, and my magical practice was just as successful before as it is now. It's just that the way I do things is slightly different. So in my experience, I don't think deities are a necessity. Can they be wonderful to have if you want to have them? Of course they can, but they definitely aren't a requirement, at least in my experience. The next unpopular opinion is that the term baby witch can be off-putting to people starting their spiritual journeys. Baby witch may be a term that younger witches can identify with, but it also preemptively puts the idea in people's heads that they know absolutely nothing about witchcraft. I know I personally started my spiritual journey a little later than most people, and I was very discouraged by the term baby witch. Now, I had so many comments about the term baby witch, so many that I stopped screenshotting them because I couldn't talk about this topic dozens of times. I'm just going to talk about it once. But for me, I don't have any strong opinions on it. I don't have any dislikes or likes about the term. For me, it's just a term that people often use to identify themselves as within the community. And I don't remember it being that old of a term. I don't remember it being used all that much when I was starting out, so I don't know if it's just become more popular with the rise of Instagram and TikTok, I'm not quite sure. But to me, the term is very reminiscent of the phrase baby bat that's used to describe beginners into the gothic or alternative subculture. So I don't have any really strong negative associations with it, though I can understand why other people maybe do. I think it all depends on individual choice. You know, everyone's going to have a different opinion on this topic. Some people are going to want to refer to themselves as a baby witch, other people aren't. And I think it's all just about respecting how we choose to identify ourselves as, and not pushing that onto everyone else, which is why largely in all of my content, I refer to beginner practitioners as exactly that, beginner practitioners, because the phrase beginner just means starting out. It doesn't necessarily associate it with a particular age group. And then practitioner doesn't just refer to those who identify as witches, but it covers a whole range of different titles that people might take when they start practicing one or many different magical traditions. So for me, I like the phrase beginner practitioner just because I find that it encompasses a lot of different people, and it isn't quite so jarring, because I know that baby witch can be quite jarring for some people and they really don't like it. The only thing I really don't like about the phrase baby witch is the fact that a lot of members of the community feel they are obligated to insult people who refer to themselves as baby witches. And like, as far as I'm concerned, it's an entirely personal choice. If someone chooses to refer to themselves as a baby witch and that's what they like to identify as, then I don't think it's right that other members of the community should just be like attacking them on social media because they don't like how this person has chosen to identify themselves as. As far as I'm concerned, identify yourself however you please, as long as you're happy and you feel comfortable doing it. You know, if you don't like the phrase baby witch, don't refer to yourself as a baby witch. You can try beginner practitioner, you can try novice, whatever it is that you prefer instead of baby witch. But equally, if you do want to refer to yourself as a baby witch, you shouldn't have other members of the community just verbally attacking you in your DMs on social media because they don't like it. You know what I mean? I feel like it just needs to be personal choice, and we all just need to respect how other people choose to identify themselves, even if we wouldn't want to be identified that way. I hope that that makes sense. But yeah, I don't really have any super strong opinions about it. I know that a lot of other people do. I just think it's about respect, not only respecting other people, but also how you feel about yourself. If you don't find that the term baby witch sits well with you, then I would not use it. Find a different terminology that you will find more comfortable for you, and then go with that instead. The next unpopular opinion is that you don't need to label yourself as a particular type of witch, for example, green witch or sea witch. I think that if you're a witch, then you're a witch. And my concern is that these labels might limit what people think they can do. Maybe one day you perform some green witchcraft, another day some sea witchery. I guess I'm just not a big fan of too many labels, although I accept that they have their place. So this one's a really interesting opinion, and I feel like people are going to go one way or the other. Some people really, really like titles, some people really, really hate them. Now for me, I use titles as a descriptor that I use to describe my practice to someone else. And for the majority of the people that I know personally, this is how they use titles as well. Instead of using a title to box in your magical practice so you're limiting yourself, instead you select a title that best suits what you do the majority of the time as a way to describe your practice to other people. So if I were to go to an event and meet other practitioners, if someone were to say to me, "Hi, I'm a kitchen witch," I have a better understanding of what it is that they practice. Because if they were to just say to me, "Hi, I'm a witch," I'm not going to have any real understanding of what it is that they do, because witchcraft is such a huge collection of practices that it really could be anything. But if someone says to me, "Hi, I'm a storm witch," or "Hi, I'm a green witch," I then know the kind of things that these three people do, and I can identify the differences between their practice based on how they identify themselves. On my channel, I refer to myself as a HearthWitch because right this minute in my magical practice, the majority of what I do can be bottled down into Hearth Witchcraft. But I haven't always been a Hearth Witch. I've been a storm witch. I've been an elemental practitioner. These titles shouldn't box you in, and if you feel like it is boxing you in, then I would say steer clear of them. I just find that they're really good at sharing your practice with other people if they do ask. It's just way easier to say it as "I'm a green witch" than it is to explain every individual thing that you do. Now, where I think it gets concerning is when I get DMs, and I'm sure lots of other people have had DMs or comments about this too, or you've at least seen them, of beginners saying, "How can I know what type of witch I am?" And I think, especially with social media, we see all of these posts about the different types of witches, and all of these posts seem to discuss these types of witches as though they're different species, as though a person is born into being a particular type of witch, and you have to find out what that is before you start, and then once you're that type of witch, you can never change it ever again. And it does kind of confuse beginners a lot, because when you don't know anything about the magical tradition, you don't know anything about the practice, you really can start to believe that you have a very particular box that you have to put yourself in, and you have to know it before you get started. When in reality, these types of witches are simply descriptors that explain what you do the majority of the time. That doesn't mean that I have to practice Hearth Witchcraft all the time. I can branch out and do other things, but the majority of my practice can be very easily condensed down into Hearth Witchcraft. And I didn't start out practicing Hearth Witchcraft. I started out practicing something completely different. And then as my practice developed and changed, and as I found my own style, I bounced from type of witch to type of witch. I went from an elemental witch to a sea witch to a storm witch. And I bounced around, and the title that I used changed because when I was describing my practice to other people, if my practice had changed, I would then change the description that I used for it. So when I was primarily working with the ocean, and I was working with water spirits and the water element a lot, and I was working a lot of sea magic, I referred to myself as a sea witch. But if I was to refer to myself as a sea witch today, it wouldn't make any sense because I don't live by the sea and I don't work with sea witchcraft like I used to. So I think titles are fine as long as you don't box yourself in. A title isn't meant to trap you in this little box forever and this is all you can ever do. And if you are a beginner and you're watching this, just know that you don't have to find out what type of witch you are before you get started. If anything, you find out what type of magic and what type of style you have after you've been practicing for a while. You're going to find that your title, your style of magic, your style of practice is going to change as you develop as a practitioner. So don't be afraid to leave one box and move into another. Don't be afraid to change titles, to bounce from one thing to another as you develop, because you cannot let yourself stagnate in this box, this title that just doesn't work for you anymore. Just make sure that you're keeping it free. If you do want to have a title, if you do want to say that you are a HearthWitch or a Green Witch, just make sure that you don't feel trapped within that, because if you start feeling trapped within that, you're then not going to be growing as a practitioner. Now, this one really might polarize some of you out there, and that is, Jesus is an effective deity to work with. Now, for me, I don't see Jesus as being any different from working with Poseidon or Hecate or Kronos or Herne or any of the other potential deity figures out there. For me, it's just a different path, it's a different practice. And I know that some people are going to say that you can't be a Christian witch, but as far as I'm concerned and in my experience interacting with other members of the community, I've met many Christian witches who have very successful magical practices, and it works really well for them and their belief system, and that's a very personal thing. If working with a particular deity works for someone, then I'm not going to say no it doesn't, because if it works for them, then it works for them. You know, it might not work for me, but the way I work might not work for other people as well. As far as I'm concerned, if working with Jesus as their deity figure works for them, and it fits in with their belief system and into their tradition, and it works well for their practice, then I'm not going to sit here and say, no, you can't do that. And when it comes to looking back through witchcraft history, particularly in Britain, we do see a lot of Christian-based texts appearing within written spells and charms. And so really, I can't see any problem with working with Jesus as a deity as long as it works for them. That's completely fine with me, because it's not on me to decide what someone should and shouldn't work with. And we do start to see it. There's many different magical traditions out there where, as Christianity began to overlay the pre-existing beliefs, we see witchcraft incorporating aspects of that new belief system into their own. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as it works for the person in question, then it shouldn't really matter to me whether it works. You know? And sometimes I feel as though there's very polarized opinions on that, but really it's not my place to question the deity that someone else works with. As long as they are working appropriately and safely with them, and it works well for them, then all is good. The next opinion is that you don't have to have a solid or daily magical practice. It's great to have a magical practice, but not everyone has the vitality to do it every day. Small things count as daily practice. Even a daily 1 card or rune reading counts. Don't feel bad because someone else is doing 17 different things as their morning routine. The craft should be unique to you. Not everyone has the free time or headspace to do magic. That's normal. This one I completely agree with. Although it can be really nice doing things every single day, especially things that need repetition, such as writing in a dream journal, undertaking divinations, practicing your meditation, mind calming, visualization, energy work practices, doing it every day isn't something that's sustainable for everyone. And in the world of social media, where we can scroll on TikTok or Instagram for hours on end, we might follow influencers who post about their magical practice several times a day. And it seems as though they're spending every waking minute of their day practicing witchcraft, and you might feel that you aren't a real witch if you aren't doing the same. But I think it's really important to note that what you see on social media isn't real life. You might want it to be real life, but it really isn't. For you, practicing witchcraft is a passion. It's something that you love. It's something of use and value in your life. To them, it's financial income. They might also love it. It might be a passion for them, but it's something that they do to gain money from as well. They need to maintain their audience on social media in order to continue doing what they love. And just as with everything we see online, the witchcraft community on social media is not entirely real, just as the beauty community online isn't entirely true to real life. People will use filters, people will post photos and videos that they took weeks, months, even years ago in order to maintain the interaction on their feed. So if you're seeing people on social media and you're thinking that they're practicing for 4, 5, 6 hours a day and that you aren't a real practitioner because you're not doing what they're doing, the difference is that they are doing it and they're also maintaining a social media account. You might be doing it alongside other things that put your time and your energy under pressure. And that's the other big thing. Not everyone has perfect health, both mental and physical. And so when it comes to different people, some people might have mental, physical exhaustion. Some people may have disabilities that make it difficult. Some people might have other commitments, like work, or being a primary carer, or working several different jobs, or they might simply be mentally or physically exhausted, and that doesn't make you any less of a practitioner. And another note to add into this is that you don't need to be undertaking witchcraft for everything every single day of the week. I've spoken to some people who say that they will do 10 to 20 spells every single day, and I have so many questions. The first one is why? The second one is how? The third one is, could you not simplify that down to do less workings that are more successful? The fourth one is, how do you find so many things that you need to do workings for every single day? I am confused. For the majority of magical practitioners, once you've got past the really exciting first stages of learning witchcraft, typically you want to avoid doing spell work and ritual unless you really need it. And if that's practicing once every month, or once every 6 months, or once every year if it needs to be that way, that doesn't make you any less of a practitioner, because you're still undertaking the thought processes of a practitioner. You still see the world through a practitioner's thought process. It's just you aren't necessarily doing active workings every day of the week. And I've noticed at the minute, in a lot of books that are being published right now, there's this real pushing of the idea of not being an armchair magician. An armchair magician is a term that's used to describe someone who reads lots of books but doesn't put it into practice. And I think it's really important to note that being an armchair magician isn't necessarily a bad thing. It might just mean that you've not needed to practice actively at that given time. Or it might be that you have health concerns or other more important things in your life that need to be put ahead of witchcraft. So don't feel bad if you're not practicing every single day. And actually, my question to people who do 20 spells every day just for themselves is, what are you casting all of the spells for? How do you find so many things that you need to do spell work for? I am genuinely curious, because I will maybe do active spell work every month, maybe, if I need to. But other than that, I just do little things, I will just carry around little items, sigils. I might do a cleansing here, a cleansing there. I might recharge some jewelry here. But I'm not really doing full-blown ritual work 10 times a day. And I'm honestly baffled by people who have that many things that they need to do spell work on. Anyway, continuing. The next one says, basically no one accused of witchcraft during the witch trials was a witch. So no, you aren't the daughters of the witches they couldn't burn. And this one, I actually agree with as well. I've seen so many jumpers and t-shirts and prints with that phrase, we are the granddaughters of the witches you couldn't burn. It's essentially been shown that the majority of the people that were accused, tried, and in some cases executed for witchcraft were actually not doing anything wrong in the first place. They weren't even practicing witchcraft. Now, there are a few accounts that do go into such detail, such accurate detail regarding the practices of the time, that either they were given the information in which they were to give as their confession, or they may have understood, known about, or practiced some form of magical tradition. And for the time period, it was pretty common for everyday people to still be interacting one-on-one with cunning folk or wise folk, so it isn't really out of the question that they might have an understanding of it. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I'll be curious to know what you all think about this. Do you like the phrasing of that? Do you like the idea of it? Or do you not like the idea of it? For me, I think it's just incredibly inaccurate, because witchcraft isn't really hereditary. Certain gifts are certainly hereditary. You'll often find that empathy moves through family lines. You'll also find that someone having psychic dreams and premonitions often goes through family lines as well, but really anyone can learn and practice witchcraft. Not everyone is going to be good at it, but everyone has the ability to learn and to practice it. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't like the slogan aspect of it, because I feel like it really diminishes the fact that a lot of these people were completely innocent. They actually didn't do any witchcraft at all and were still put through this horrific treatment. But let me know, what do you think about this one? This one I think might polarize people a little bit as well. The next one is all about tarot. This one says, Tarot decks don't need to be treated with such reverence. Don't get me wrong, I love and respect all my decks, but the sheer amount of policing I see online is ridiculous. People criticising how people handle their decks, store them, use them, etc. I also think the tradition of being gifted your first deck is neat, but it's not accessible for a lot of witches, especially those who have to keep their practice under wraps. There's also a lot of rigid enforcement of what the cards mean, and I see a lot of inexperienced witches afraid to step outside the mainstream interpretations. Your own interpretation of the cards will always be more meaningful and helpful to you than anything a book can say. And this is another one where I actually completely agree with this. And I've seen so many beginners be really nervous and scared and actually really start doubting themselves. And it can be in many cases that beginner practitioners who join these groups hoping to gain assistance end up being so paranoid of saying or doing anything wrong in their magical practice that they just give up on it. They're just like, it's not worth it, and they then leave, which I think is really sad because a lot of these practitioners would be really successful, really welcome practitioners to the community, but because there's so much elitism when it comes to decks and tarot in particular, that it becomes really disheartening, especially if you are a beginner. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some decks that I absolutely love and I take immense care of. But that's not because I don't think that they're going to give me a good reading if I treat them wrong. That's because decks are expensive and I really like keeping my decks nice. I have decks that I treat in completely different ways depending on which deck it is and how I'm using them. So I have what I refer to as my working decks. These are the cards that I will beat up, I will batter, I will do reading after reading after reading with them, and I don't mind them getting battered and torn up a little bit because I do read them so much and I love them so much, and they are my daily decks. I then have decks that I don't use that often and I treat them with more care because they were really expensive and I really want to keep the artwork and the cards protected. And then I have other decks that I treat with even more respect that have spirits attached to them, and because of the spirit attachment, you do have to treat them with much more care. But I will never understand the people that say that you have to wrap your cards in silk. The fact that some people will say you have to use crystals on your cards, that you have to cleanse them every single time, that you have to do this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this, and they list off this whole plethora of things that people have to do with their cards, and most of the time, you don't have to do it with your cards. And a lot of the time, as mentioned here, it can make it very inaccessible to people. I know that wrapping your cards in black silk is a very traditional thing to do that a lot of people recommend. But silk is expensive and a lot of people don't have access to or can't afford to buy silk wrapping for any or all of the card decks that they have. Other people might not be able to have their first deck given to them or gifted to them because they don't know anyone else that will do that. Or they're in a place, a location, country, or a family where it's dangerous to outwardly express your beliefs, whether they are religious or spiritual, if they are outside of the everyday norm. And I find it so disheartening because there are so many practitioners out there that could be phenomenal practitioners. It could be wonderful for them. But because the online community is so toxic, they end up leaving because they feel like they're doing everything wrong. And especially there when it comes to the intuitive meanings for cards, it's true that your intuitive reading is potentially going to be more successful than reading out of a book. Now, that's not me saying that books have no purpose, because they definitely do. And when you're getting started, learning and understanding the meanings, the associations within the imagery of that card can be exceptionally useful. Your intuition then kicks in and it starts picking out certain aspects of that card that you need to focus on for your reading. And when you combine the two, you can have a really wonderful, successful reading. Just using your intuitive abilities can also lead to having very, very successful readings. The problem comes when you have certain members of the online community dictating that everyone has to read the card the same way they do, even though they're reading the card with their own intuition added on top of it. So really, it's not going to apply to everyone else's readings. It's really only going to work super well for them. So when it comes to reading cards, just as with witchcraft, just remember that everyone is going to be different. Everyone is going to do it slightly differently. There are different paths, different traditions, different techniques. You don't have to practice the same way I do. And you don't have to practice the same way as anyone else online does, or even your friend that you know in person. Everyone can have a different practice, and it can still be just as successful. You don't have to be a copy and paste version. And actually, I would say you're better not being a copy and paste version. If you watch my content and you like the style of my practice, then sure, give it a go. But just make sure that you aren't boxing yourself into only practicing the same way I do. I never want to be anyone's sole source of information or anyone's sole guide when it comes to witchcraft. Because if I am, your practice might then become copy and paste, which might not be that successful for you. I would always recommend trying and finding your own approach, because usually that's going to be the way that's going to work best for you. Next up, this opinion says, so many very young people are primarily learning witchcraft from other very young people, and they're doing themselves a disservice by devaluing older practitioners and the wisdom they can share. It's not that older folks are always right, or that the kids don't have valuable contributions to make, it's just that it creates a kind of echo chamber. People prioritize things heard on TikTok or Instagram over input from others who've practiced for decades. It's kind of weird to watch as someone in the middle. Now this, I kind of agree and disagree at the same time. I will explain that. I don't agree that it's devaluing older people. I just think that when people are solely learning or primarily learning on social media, and social media is mainly made up of younger individuals, that then just becomes what they learn from. I don't think that older people are more valuable than younger people, and I don't think that younger people are more valuable than older people. I think that everyone has value within the magical community. I have met some older practitioners who actually don't know as much as younger practitioners that I've met, and vice versa. I think that everyone collectively is significant within the community and has positive, useful things to share. The one thing that I do take from this, though, that I do agree with, is that especially online, you can definitely get an echo chamber, and that echo chamber is often inaccurate. So what happens is you almost have a game of telephone being played. So one person will find a piece of information that they then share on TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media platform it might be. Other people then take that information and repeat it. But over time, the information gets changed, altered, warped, and sometimes misinterpreted. And then suddenly it becomes a completely different bit of information that doesn't make any sense. But because people keep repeating it, people think it's true. And then you end up with so much misinformation being spread around Tumblr, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even YouTube, as well as in books and in person. And it can be a real problem. The other problem that you often find online is that a lot of people will share information that they have never actually practiced themselves, and it becomes almost a case of beginners teaching beginners. And before you know it, you have information spread around social media that none of these people have ever tried. And it leads to the potential for misinformation happening. And I do just want to make it clear here that I don't think that learning from social media is bad, not at all. I just think that you need to balance it out with other forms of media. Slower forms of media like books are often more accurate than fast forms of media like TikTok, because it's much harder for misinformation to be rewritten time and time again, because it takes so many years to get a book published, versus on TikTok or Instagram where it takes just a few seconds to repeat that information. So I would say social media isn't necessarily bad. Learning from younger people definitely isn't bad. It's just a case of balancing out the things that you're learning from. Don't just learn from one person. Learn from many different people, from many different sources, in many different types of practice, of many different age groups, because that way you can get a really good understanding for witchcraft, and you can really help balance out your magical practice without getting a huge amount of misinformation that has often been misidentified as it's been passed around from person to person. And then the last one, because I have already been filming for 2 hours and I am not even halfway through these comments, and I don't want this video to be extraordinarily long, but this one says, not everything means something. I am in some witchcraft communities on social media that will ask each other what everything that happens to them means spiritually and assume that it's some kind of sign or omen. I swear I've seen someone ask what it means that their cat is shedding, looking for a supernatural explanation. Now this one I have a lot of experience with myself, and ultimately I have left the majority of witchcraft social media circles because I just got so frustrated by the number of these posts. Now, don't get me wrong, I think everyone should have the ability to ask questions, especially if you're just starting out or you have a genuine question about the practice. I think you really should be allowed to ask the general community if they can give you some insight into what can help you. And I think that is a fantastic use of these sites, and it can be good for everyone involved. Because some people might have the same question you have, but they're too nervous to post it, and by you posting that question, they might be able to gain insight, and others can gain insight off it, even if they didn't really have that question to start off with. However, the majority of these groups have become completely clogged up by people sending a photo and asking what the spiritual significance of it is. And sometimes this can be really fun, and definitely sometimes these things can have spiritual significance. But some people will spam multiple of these Facebook groups or multiple forum posts with the same question, and then they'll do it every day about everything. Now, definitely some things can have spiritual significance to them. If you are seeing foxes everywhere in your life, and you don't live somewhere that's very well known for foxes, and you've never seen a fox before in your area, and all of a sudden you're seeing a fox twice a day, every day, and you have no idea why, and you're seeing the word fox everywhere, and you're hearing the word fox, and you're seeing imagery of foxes everywhere you go, and you can't escape it, that's one thing. But when someone wakes up from a nap and they are asking what the indentation from their bracelet means spiritually, that's when I think we start having an issue. But there are definitely certain members of the community online that do take it way too far. They are spamming sites with these pictures asking about signs, and it does become a problem when it starts to clog up social media sites so that other people can't use them. So when you log into Facebook and you have 30 notifications and every single one of them is from one Facebook page, and there's 30 people posting a photo and then asking if anyone can see anything in the photo or if it's a sign, it then gets to the point where no one can use that page for anything else. And I think it's actually become pretty common now for Facebook pages to stop people from doing this. Like you're actually not allowed to send a photo asking if it's a sign because it's become such a problem. But let me know, do you like seeing these things on social media? Do you like looking at it and seeing if it's a sign or seeing if you can see a face in the fire or those kind of things? Or would you much rather they not be on social media so that you can just talk to other people and interact in a more organic way rather than trying to find a face in the fire or looking for some kind of sign or omen? Let me know. And then lastly, I just want to slide one of my own unpopular witchcraft opinions into this video because it's my video and so I can get away with doing that. My unpopular witchcraft opinion of today's video is that witchcraft doesn't have to be your entire personality. Yeah, I said it. Because I get comments all the time, both in person and mostly online, to be honest, saying that I am not a witch because insert random statement here. I'm not a witch because I dress like this instead of dressing like a witch, whatever that means. I get told that I'm not a witch because I wear makeup and witches don't wear makeup. And I'm like, well, that's not accurate. That's not true at all. None of that's true. And I don't understand why, but a lot of people feel as though in order to be a witch, it has to be your entire existence. Like being a witch has to be the only thing you care about in your entire life. And I just want to make a point in saying here that it doesn't have to be the case. You know, I'm still a witch if I wear black lipstick. I'm still a witch if I like alternative fashion. I'm still a witch if I listen to rock music instead of listening to, I don't know, what would witches even listen to? This is the problem with that statement. The problem is that no witch is the same as every other witch. Every witch is unique to themselves. And so it just It baffles me. It confuses me so much when people say things like this. So I just want to say to all of you out there that being a witch doesn't have to be your only identifiable personality trait. It really doesn't. You can like other things as well. I can like rock music and alternative fashion and drawing and writing and still practice witchcraft and still be a witch. Because being a witch doesn't have to be your sole personality trait. And I'm honestly confused as to why people seem to think this has to be the case. I don't understand. I am very confused. Can you tell? But it just seems like such a modern thing, because historically witchcraft was just a part of everyday life. It was just an accepted thing that there was likely someone in your local area that you could visit to gain charms and items. And they also had other things that they did. You know, oftentimes they had a job and then they worked magic at night. They often tended to land as well. They had children. They did other things. Their entire personality trait wasn't witchcraft, and neither is mine. And I'm confused. I'm just very confused. So let me know what you think. Do you think that to be a witch, it has to be your entire personality? Or can you do other things and like other things and be a witch? And I think I know where this one's going to go. I don't think that this one is necessarily unpopular. I just think that some people are so determined that it has to be true that they try to push it on everyone. Okay, that's me done for today. So those are your unpopular opinions for today's video. I have been filming for 2 hours. I've gone through a lot of unpopular opinions, and I actually haven't even got halfway through the list from the last video. So I may end up making a second one of these because I really like talking about these kind of things, and you all know I can talk for England. I talk a whole bunch more than I probably need to, but you're still here, so I hope that you did enjoy this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you have any unpopular opinions about witchcraft that I have not talked about today, feel free to put them down in the comment section so we can start having a conversation about it, and they might end up being featured in a future video on this topic. If you would like more content from me, I do have a folklore podcast that's linked down in the description box. We also have a Discord server where you can chat with other members of the community via Discord. And if you haven't seen the original unpopular opinion video, I will link that down below as well, along with all of my social media and lots of other cool things if you would like to check the description box out. If you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best with magical content every single week. A massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Some of your names will be on the end screen in just a moment. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Oh, there are many ways to test the audio levels on your microphone. You can clap to sync it up, or you can do what I do, which is just sing really popular songs from like 10 years ago really badly. It's fantastic. Super quick solution. Alright, just making sure that everything that's meant to be in frame is in frame. Is it already? What time is it? It is 9:39 at night. I have tried to script 2 different videos today and have failed miserably on both of them. So instead we are filming this, and I discovered this in one of my last videos. I have this shadow right here and I can see it. It's so annoying. I'm gonna go move my light so then I don't have this annoying shadow that makes me look like I have a third nostril, like right there. Did I make it worse? I think I made it worse. Okay, I'm gonna shuffle it again. Better? No.